Bonjour, messieurs, dames.
Good morning. I'm a chief editor at Challenge magazine. I'm pleased to introduce this roundtable on AI and preventive medicine. Maybe not. It's going to be a fascinating discussion. We have a number of speakers who are very different profiles, as we'll see. Sitting on my left, Reda from Pfizer France, Núria, Pérez, Cullell, Pierre Fabre, Florence Allouche on my right, and Pierre Dubois, TSC. Could you please pitch yourselves by way of an introduction? 30 seconds, 1 minute for your Núria, would you care to start? Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm a pharmacist and a medical general director of Núria. Pierre Fabre is present in the whole world, and they do medical development and cosmetics in particular. And this is why our approach of the patients takes on board prevention, treatment, and what happens after treatment therapy. We are pretty convinced that medicine is improving and changing very fast, thanks in part to AI. And this is why we do customized treatment of patients based on the specificities of each individual. Reda Guiha, you are the president of. Yes, my name is Reda Guiha. I'm the chairman of Pfizer France. I started in 2022, September. I'm a pharmacist and I have a 30 years experience in the field of healthcare. And Pfizer is a global company. We are in almost countries worldwide, be it direct presence or indirect presence. We specialize in a number of fields: oncology, rare diseases, and vaccines, hospital products. And this is my particular field of interest. And we develop a number of compounds, or we are developing a number of compounds, and we're working on this in order to speed up the development of these new compounds. There are about 150 clinical research programs. Florence Allouche. Good morning. Thank you for having me in this roundtable. My name is Florence Allouche Aknin. I'm a pharmacist as well. I've been working in technological transfer in Paris with public assistance, that's public health. We've developed a number of startup companies involving doctors and pharmacists, and also created a startup, Fabre Vision. I'm creating a sovereign venture. This is an investment fund to invest at an early stage innovative startups that require artificial intelligence. I also teach. I'm professor at the pharmacy university, because pharmacists in the future will need to incorporate and take on board all the new developments. Thank you, Florence. Then Pierre Dubois. I'm professor of economics at the TSC. We created a research center a few years ago, and I work intensively on health industry, pharmacy, of course, public policies, and the impact of the public policies in this field, with the rules and regulations that may impact on the use of AI, may also the way in which regulators facilitate or hamper access to the market. We do a lot of research in this field because there are a number of reforms, major reforms going on in the US and in Europe that's bound to make an impact on this sector and will eventually make an impact on the health of individuals. So let's tackle this topic with you first. Reda, what about pharmacy? Health crisis, unprecedented global health crisis, technological revolution, unprecedented as well. So it's really a perfect storm or tempest. What is the role of the industry? What about innovation? How are you working? How are you developing new compounds? Okay, perfect tempest or storm. Yes, it is indeed a perfect storm. We're living a fascinating area in terms of sciences of life, where there are two revolutions combined. First, the revolution of medical biology, that new mechanism of action, new technologies, platforms. You probably heard about messenger NRA, rare diseases. We referred to gene therapy in oncology, cell therapy, etc. All these are new approaches. So there has been a revolution in this level with platforms. At the same time, there's been another revolution, which is artificial intelligence, AI. And this is the combination of these two revolutions that's given us a fascinating renaissance or rebirth of life science. Well, it's not absolutely new. Of course, generative AI is absolutely no. We're not sure where this is going to lead us. But the industry has been living with machine learning data for quite some time. With a data scientist, this has been the case for a few years, going a few years back. What about the introduction of this new technology and algorithm? What does it, can it change? Let me tell you this. You're absolutely right in this. It's been with us for some years. There have been a number of waves. It started with the machine learning 10 years ago. Many pharma companies used machine learning back then in the life cycle, throughout the life cycle of clinical development and also post-clinical development. Please give us example. In terms of clinical research, you have a lab stage, pre-clinical stage. Once you have the proof of concept, you shift to clinical tests using models, and then marketing approval, authorization, and the pre-clinical practice. Now, in at the stage of preclinical stage, that was right at the time of COVID. Thanks to AI, we've been able to speed up the development, the pre-clinical development, which is Paxlovid, an antiviral agent against COVID-19. We had to reduce the rate by 90%. Let me try and explain. Clinical stage, we start with a drop discovery. Discovery stage, there are libraries of a billion molecules. You screen a few of them, and then you synthesize a few examples that they test at clinical stage to see which one works best. So with AI, what we're trying to do with this antiviral, instead of going through all these stages and steps, we immediately synthesize 600 molecules instead of 3,000 for testing purposes to get the proof of concept at the preclinical level. And then, thanks to AI, we've been able to identify the oral form instead of a intravenous form, and that was very important at the time of COVID. But as you know, hospitals were crowded, very difficult to have access to hospitals during that time of the epidemic. It's much better, of course, to have a capsule at home than having to go to hospital to get an IV. At clinical level, still on COVID, at the time of COVID, I think that AI may really speed up the clinical development. recruiting patients, enrolling patients, recruiting patients. 80% of clinical studies cannot include patients in the right time frame. Thanks to AI, you can speed it up. For instance, the combinatic vaccine against COVID. Now, the time lag was limited. We've been able to reduce the time by 90%. At the time of COVID, it was absolutely crucial because COVID is extremely dynamic from one region to the next. You see the incidence and prevalence vary a lot from one time, one moment, and one place to another. Thanks to AI, we've been able to predict which regions will have a high prevalence in terms of COVID. That's how we were successful. We've been able to enroll or include 6,000 patients in 6 countries and 150 centers or clinics, which is considered as a major achievement because 90% were able to cut down the time by 90%. Yeah, everything goes faster in terms of discovery. What do you do, Pierre Fabre? You referred to the perfect storm phrase. What about the AI? What does it contribute? What is well, as it's been explained, we live in a world with the health and care paradigm is being totally transformed. That innovation is key. Innovation aims at creating a highly personalized treatment. We used to treat a disease, a condition, symptoms. Now we treat a patient, an individual person, as a function of his characteristics. Thanks to AI, you will be able to customize the condition of each patient and offer to each individual patient a personal, custom-made path so that we can more easily identify standard type of treatments to highly individualized treatment, and therefore the patient is more likely to survive. Thanks to AI, we'll be in a position to treat or to process many different data. For instance, socioeconomic factors, images, hospital reports, genetic data, and this takes us back to the previous roundtable presentation, things that come from outside of the patient. For instance, you refer to nutrition, food. We know that plus 250 grams of the meat a day are bound to trigger colonic cancer. So we'll be able to identify biomarkers and associate it to a risk factor. So when a patient is treated, you look at this risk score, and the basis of the risk score will be in a position to suggest a prevention pathway and early diagnosis and follow-up pattern. And this is what we're working on at Pierre Fabre, both in oncology and the field of rare diseases. You know, AI will enable us to make tremendous progress in rare disease patients because on the basis of one genetic or gene mutation, we'll be able to develop custom-made treatments that will be administered at the right point of time in order to reverse the mutation. So this is really a revolution in terms of diagnosis with highly personalized treatments. Could you give us examples? Yes, very concretely, what we can do today, and this is what we do at Pérez. We have a project with FIA, which is the cancer and artificial intelligence set. Pfizer is present here. So the objective of FIAC is taking the data and then developing a customized patient. For instance, lung cancer, you know that change is the main killer worldwide. Mortality is very high, both in men and in women. So we're working on hospital data. Then we need to analyze using machine learning so that we use a hospital report. So we apply language treatment and organize the data we get. And then with the machine learning technique, you can do two things at the same time. First of all, you can create types of pathways, health pathways, and then look at the likelihood that a patient will survive. From that, you can extract the best pathways, the best treatment according to each type of patient. And this is very important because lung cancer, one type, which is non-small cell cancer. We know for Caucasian population, 60% of this non-small cell cancer is driven by genetic mutation. So the doctor, the patient, when he sees his doctor, must be able to identify his genetic mutation. And then will be in a position to administer the right treatment. And that's all thanks to artificial intelligence. We eventually can understand why patients do not get this detection of the cell, or it comes in too late. So the treatment given to the patient is not the right one, or it comes too late. So this will enable us to solve this problem where discontinuity in the pathway, the care pathway. There are breaks, there are times where the patient doesn't have access to the best possible treatment to cure him or her, thanks to innovative therapies, cell therapies that attack the genetic mutation and make it possible for this person to survive. So it's really a very hopeful approach that is bound to further enrich the relationship that is created between the patient and the doctor has to be involved. Both patient and doctor are equally involved in the decision. So it's really a great assistance for the patient and make sure that he or she can accept the treatment which is offered by the doctor. Okay, so we understand that it's going to be a revolution, especially for doctors in their offices. What are you doing at the same time? You're looking for researchers, trying to identify researchers and scientists and encourage them to create their own lab or their own company. Well, this is already in progress. There is a culture, a different culture, startup creations. So many tools have been inventing to make sure that the innovation. There was Deep Tech Tour organized by BI France last week. So PhDs, researchers, scientists can set up their own company. They get subsidies, assistance to do this. So we need to convince them that the tool they're going to use doesn't come from typical research labs. IA is a revolution, but it's also a tool. In fact, startups will be created by doctors, pharmacists, biologists, mathematicians, physicists. And we see that young people's create startups. You have scientists who publish in Nature, people who are really specialists in the semantic analysis of things that we were not aware of in the field of health. Of course, there were publications, you got a patent, and you could develop a new molecule. Now, with the additional layer of deep tech, which is time-consuming, it's a long process before you can get the marketing approval for a new drug. So it's really a very long time, especially if it's a startup, because that sooner or later they will have to find a partner to help them with the funding. So IA is a tool. It is indispensable. It must use this tool. And some companies okay, they do innovation, define peptides, conjugate antibody, all the innovations that you'd be referring. And then you have startups who do capsid optimization, genomics, a company that does nothing but finalizing the viral capsule, which is a major point. They're not allowed to go wrong when they start the first initial production because it's extremely expensive. It can't possibly spot the money coming from investors. And the other part is molecule design. We have set up chemiotecs. We try transposition of molecules. And then there are companies like Chemia that do molecule designing, take into account the cell receptor and the molecule that fits, that matches this. And then you have a generic genome, which is a major revolution. Genomic twins is very useful. You compile data, end up with a digital twin. You have the map of the cells, of the receptors, the enzyme cascades, reactions between the various components of the cell. So this is an extremely powerful tool for young companies. It cuts down the time, the preclinical stage, and probably will be discussing the financial aspect of this. It requires lots of money. It's highly capitalistic. So the fact that you're saving time, all the drugs go before a health homologation agency to demonstrate that you can skip a number of tests, animal tests, for instance. You can rely on the computer. And this is things which is already faced, happens in the US. We're slightly slower in Europe, but these tools will be really at the basis and the origin of these thoughts. And the next step will be the return on investments. So this is where the economists will have to step in on the ROI. Economic models, too, are changing over time. Our friends from Lab, startup is sold to a pharma group, extremely expensive. Does it make business sense? I mean, this kind of tectonic plates revolution. So much has been said on the role of IA, the fact that it's a really disruptive technology is bound to change the way we do research and development, the way they innovate in the health industry. When I started being interested in this industry, the first publications I would read back then on the cost of development of a new compound from the US in the early 90s say that it takes a minimum of $1 billion to get new molecules. And this included all the difficulties we're faced with at the clinical stage, all the failures we're bound to be faced with, because phase one, 1% only what comes from phase one will end up in the market. So taking into account the high rate of failure, the figure is close to 1 billion. So some studies, so that was back in the 90s. Now, every year, every 5 or 10 years, a new publication, a new feature would come in, and the costs increased over time. Now, it's close to 3 billion, tripled, 3 times increase in the cost of development. Well, this is, it tells you what? It tells us that the simplest, the easiest innovation have already been discovered. When you tackle more difficult areas, you have to invest more. You have to go on more basic research, more clinical trials. So it gets more complicated and therefore more costly. So this is really the technological frontier that moves all the time. Over time, it's bound to become more and more costly. But there's hope, because these innovations like AI contributes a new approach to R&D, and it might as well lower the costs at the end of the day. So it's not a killer acquisition. No, that's something else. I'll be referring to killer acquisition later on. So our traditional approach to research based on clinical trials, scientists, lab tests, etc., and so forth. And the model did not change. It was always the same. But the problems were getting more and more complex, and the cost was increasing accordingly. Now, with IA, there's a new way, totally novel way of thinking and doing research that lowers the costs. And something that couldn't possibly be discovered before because a human mind didn't have the capacity to digest and transform billions of data on gene, for instance. This is really huge. Now we have IT capacity, we have the mathematical algorithmic capacity to process this data. So it's a totally new way to research. And the cost of research will eventually become lower. So the development costs that increase in for sure over time is bound to either stagnate or even better than that, to go down, which is welcome by the authorities. Health is not going to the exclusive reserve of the wealthy population. It will be available to all. As Reda said, this is something that is obvious. We have it in figures. Look at data. A clinical trial, phase 1 trials in 2023, very significant proportion is on molecules, compounds that were discovered thanks to IA. For instance, in 2023, 24 compounds were in phase 1, discovered by AI, not just a new use of discovery. It was really research done by IA labs on out of 24 phase 1. The success rate usually success rate is much lower in phase 1. Now, out of 24, 21 made it to phase 2. These compounds, the development of these compounds were much shorter, faster. So you can also identify things that are more promising and end up being more successful. You still need to know whether these molecules that get to phase 2 are eventually successful, because it's only 10 years that we'll be using IA in research in pharmacies. Well, it's a new thing that we've discovered, the exponential growth of the use of IA in clinical trials. So in the future, there's hope. Very good for everybody's health, because they're bound to be very useful innovations. So that was my first point. I could tell you more. Why don't you tell us about the consequences on the market and competition? Is it a good thing for competition? What about competition? Is it going to be a fast elimination of the weaker? Yeah, I know you had a session on competition and the role of AI. Well, we can go faster, costs will go down, and it gives a greater importance, significance to algorithm, to data. We know that access to data is key, and it's tricky. It's highly regulated in the health field. So possibly this competitive advantage that we have with IA might be concentrated in the hands of those who have control of AI, the big platforms, those who have the best scientists in AI, etc. We might, it's not something that we fear. You might have thought that IA would eventually replace research or pharmacist research in pharmacy. Someone has tried to identify the link between a given genome and a particular disease. the companies that rely on AI, do they have a competitive advantage or not? Are they going to prevail over those who don't use it, or those who use AI but coming from the computer science or IT, algorithm, traditional, but they're not specialized in health, which is the case of Pierre Fabre or Pfizer, for instance. So this is a recent U.S. study showing that artificial intelligence and scientific knowledge are complementary rather than cross-killers. AI helps you to identify new targets, drugs, biomarkers. I'm not an expert in that kind of science, but this is what AI enables or helps us to find, as Reda and Florence said. But AI is not perfect. It's bound to make mistakes once in a while. And the study shows that scientists are better when it comes to identifying type 1 or type 2 errors of artificial that would declare too many false negatives. We have to continue with the clinical trials. While in fact, scientists who are aware, they know the mechanisms of biology, are in a better position thanks to their knowledge and their background to identify false positives and to sort out the associations that are detected by AI could not have been detected by human beings, and say, okay, this is the right one. So clearly, the labs that use scientists and researchers and AI do better than those who only one or the other. So how do you react to this, Reda?
Deux commentaires. Pierre a parlé du nombre de molécules qui sont actuellement en...
Well, thanks to AI, thanks to the proof of concept, and in translational research, that is to say, how to translate science into the human being, we have witnessed a real boom. Now, when it comes to when it comes to turning from phase 1 to phase 3, that is to say, defining the right product dosage, since phase 3 is just the development phase of drugs. I'd like to say that, and then let me give you a concrete example. What did we do at Pfizer? AI has helped to speed up the inclusion of patients in order to identify the right profile. What does it mean? It's a patient's profile. We are studying and we're identifying. And I go back to you, Laura, I agree with you when you mention the customization of research, so to speak. We do identify the right profile which can benefit from a protocol. That's another stage. And another added stage is to redesign protocols. If you have got a technique abiding by a protocol, you have to make sure that the rules are applied on the right patient, on the good patient, so to speak. And the success rate has thus been increased by 50%, and we have accelerated by 37% patient recruitment. It's also very essential when we look at these results. We did mention knowledge, but the idea is rather going for partnerships. Even in large-sized companies, we can do it all alone. No one has got a full monopoly on innovation. Some striking example is BioNTech, which has the RNA platform existing since the 50s. It was discovered in the 50s in England, and several companies had already this technology available. Now, in order to succeed in terms of proof of concept and to turn to the human being, a partnership was necessary. And together, BioNTech, we were able to operate this transfer to human being thanks to AI. And we have been able to accelerate the development. It's crucial. So partnership is a key word to me. I think you wanted to add one point. Yes. Along the same lines, I would like to say that AI is not going to replace researchers, chemists, and GPs. But it gives us some more capacity, and it adds the accuracy of what we are doing. It also helps because it does increase the success rate, as already mentioned. So it's quite essential to be able to invest in AI in order to reach success when it comes to producing successful drugs. We have got plenty of chronic diseases such as psoriasis, just naming this one. We also have got diseases which impact young children, which are very detrimental. We are working with a company in Spain which has developed an algorithm which on the basis of shared data, makes it possible to envisage the potential degradation of the patient's health, and which also makes it possible to plan for greater severity of the disease. And this, of course, helps to better inform the patient and helps to give better advice, to advise different treatment, to prescribe different treatments. Thanks to the cooperation partnership with this company, we have been able to develop this service in Spain, in France, and other European countries to avoid higher severity of diseases, of recurring diseases, of permanent diseases, and ailments of some patients. These chronic diseases being quite detrimental to patients' living conditions and lifestyle. That's true. There are more and more partnerships. Partnership seems to be a key word. We touched upon the part to be played by startups. By the way, it might be interesting to know what type of relationship you have with these new partners. But we can think of other partners, Dassault Systems, which is a leading company in modeling. What type of partnerships or relationships do you have with these companies? Of course, AI is not to replace GPs or chemists, that's for sure, but data scientists play a more and more important part, don't they? Quite truly. In the pharmaceutical industry, there has been strong evolution in the last 2 years. We have hard data scientists and new professionals, new data professionals, in order to enhance the chemists or GPs or specialists' expertise. And I'm convinced that these data scientists will work hand in hand with the practitioners in order to innovate, to further innovate. So there is no real substitution. There is more of a complementarity between the various players. That's the future. And as far as the partnerships are concerned, at Pierre Fabre, you work in our lines of business. You are always looking for partnerships with startups in order, as already stated by Florence, to go further. I mean, partnership is a key word to push innovations. you may be surprised, but we observe that innovation is mainly found with startups. Is it something new? Is it a new trend, or is it AI related? Well, the trend is stronger now with AI. We have the Pfizer healthcare app at Pfizer with us available, which helps to screen startups to develop pharmaceutical products and to work in the diagnosis sector. For people company, startup company, had a very interesting algorithm, because this algorithm makes it possible to diagnose bladder cancer, superficial bladder cancer, at an early stage, and the algorithm makes this diagnosis, early diagnosis, possible. And this startup I've just mentioned, to diagnose this early-stage bladder cancer in about 15,000 patients at the moment. So there is a urine sample taken, studied, and AI does study the imaging and of the plates, and is able to see whether there are some remaining cancer cells. It's much more efficient than fibroscopy, and it's less painful for the patient. So this innovation was achieved by a four-person startup. That's just an example, but there are many others. Now, let me turn to highly interesting questions. To another question I find also quite interesting. Will it be possible to focus psychiatric diseases thanks to AI? Well, using semantic data, using sensors, looking at patients' behaviors on a daily basis, since everybody is being connected to a phone or any other terminal to send the data, helps a lot, and kind of compensates for the lack of visit to the psychiatrist's practice. And the analysis of the facial expressions of language, the language you use, all this is very valuable to have diagnosis. This diagnosis is going to be checked and reviewed if needed by the doctor, but it's quite valuable. Now, to go back to the partnerships you mentioned with startups and the example you just mentioned, all these genic therapies as developed by startups do require a lot of investment, but are not always part of the business model of the large pharmaceutical companies and large-sized pharmaceutical drugs are ready to invest, but they first wanted to look at preliminary data, at the preclinical results. So it's quite interesting to invest in startups, and it enhances the international visibility of a successful startup, because it helps to disseminate the interest of their results. And if large-sized pharmaceutical companies do invest in startups, and we are doing this in the digital sector. We don't do much in this respect in the health in the health sector, and let's not forget that we have to be quick, otherwise the startups may be taken over by a large-sized company, and so this type of partnership of cooperation with large-scale investment by large pharmaceutical companies should be very valuable, helpful, and should foster the emergence of new generations of researchers who will have the know-how and the know-how to do in AI. Another question? Who is going to pay for this type of innovation? Before answering this question, I'd like to go back to the use of AI in research, in biomedical research, biopharmaceutical research. And there is, the complementarity between the two yields very good results, especially in the everyday activities, research activities. There is something quite essential here. The pure players who are only AI-oriented are not going to replace researchers. We will always need science and biology, of course, but the pharmacists, the experts in biology will not be able to survive without the contribution of AI. This doesn't mean that all chemists will have to study AI, but they will have to work together with people building algorithms. In other words, partnership will be needed. That means that scientific basic knowledge will be mandatory for people working on algorithm in the fields of biology, and for people specialized in biology will need a minimal knowledge, basic knowledge in AI, of course, since these people are working in totally different fields. So complementarity will be needed, and access to data will become more and more crucial. This is already, and this will be very, very important for politicians to make decisions. We already have got some platforms. It's mandatory to be able to build European platforms to this respect. In Europe, we are kind of reluctant. We are still quite reluctant with very strict regulations protecting privacy and. Of course, there may be gaps in regulations, but there are very solid guarantees. And access to data is going to be quite valuable in the future. And we mustn't be lagging behind. And so the protection of data, European regulation, RGPD as we call it in French for short, is of course quite useful, but it may be limiting too, because if you have to give your consent whenever you want to take a step in this field, you may be a little bit hampered. But I mean, this regulation already exists for patients suffering, for instance, from prostate cancer. They are going to start a specific treatment, and they have to sign a form stating that the information on their case can be disclosed, and they have to sign a dedicated form. But we will have to review all this in light of the new partnerships on what is going on, but by sticking to some restrictive rules. Now, I'd like to go back to what you said concerning the possible complexity and our relationship with the American big tech. AI may help and reduce costs in developing drugs, but, well, let me go back to an application, a service which helps patients suffering from skin rashes and other diseases to know how their ailment is going to evolve. And you are quite right to say that if we want to do prevention in larger fields, these applications have mentioned these services which are deemed as being complementary and additional will have to become essential and will have to be included in the global patient management. When we go to a GP, we have a diagnosis and a related treatment. But when it comes to prevention, we must do a kind of global work with populations at risk. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to monitor the evolution of their disease and to treat them properly. And when it comes to the availability of data with large-sized American companies specialized in big data, we have chosen to work together with a branch line of activity, gathering the private sector, the public sector, and startups, and which makes it possible to pool our skills, to bring some funding, and thus generating all the data we have available. Any feedback on this? Well, some of these applications can be refunded, reimbursed. That is to say, you can have an application which makes it possible for the GP to monitor the patient's the patient's disease evolution remotely. But the GP has to accept, of course, to work this way. And if he does or she does, if he accepts or she accepts, he'll be refunded because it's a remote service, of course. But there is a kind of follow-up, and the Social Security fund do refund the GP. Not always clear, but this is a trend. All in all, let's say, in a nutshell, we have external partnerships which are recommended, which are credible, and which have access to these databases. Data are sent to a fully acknowledged, recognized partners. That's where data are. How far are we going to go in this direction? It's still in the pipeline, let's say. It's still in progress. If we need a highly strategic framework with all the stakeholders to see, all the players, to see how we are going to work in the future, because the more data, the more new drugs we will have, but it's not yet quite crystal clear. I'd like to add one point on what you call the digital therapeutics. using your iPhone to have a diagnosis, contact with with a practitioner. There is a real challenge here. We are talking about refunds for doctors or for patients, of course. What about prices? Well, the high health, the French health authority does assess the various tools, and AI contribution is also or is to be taken on board, because there are many newcomers meant to help the patient. So we will have to take all this on board, and because it's good to be able to cure people, but it's even much better to prevent the disease, or to be able to forecast the evolution of a disease by resorting to all the parameters available, such as epigenetics, to just name one, and taking on board the price element. And that's true, startups will be real contributors, and we really have to shift our parameters, our trends, and to shift gears, so to speak, because we have got fantastic international startups who will become major players in the health sector. I'm sure that Pierre is going to agree with me. There is a challenge here, how to set prices and how to assess the cost-result ratio. Now, concerning price, let's recall that there is a huge difference between what the patient is going to pay and what the insurance is going to pay. The insurance companies, funds, etc., joint venture funds, etc., are going to pay to the pharmaceutical companies, industrialists, etc. Of course, we all want to be protected against especially major diseases. And in Europe, I must say, we have got public insurance, health insurance systems, which cover a large fraction, very large fraction of the costs, nearly 100% for long-lasting major diseases. But now, what is and making possible for having very low out of the pocket on the patient's behalf. Although you may need a small contribution, even a very, very small contribution by patients, so that patients are aware of the cost of the health system. And so we are in this situation on the patient side, but we must also take on board the price of innovation for companies, large-size companies, startups, or if we don't do so, we will lagging behind. And we know that our European R&D investment is not at all what it is in the US and in Asia. That's why we really have to waken up and to create the appropriate ecosystem which takes on board the new technological breakthrough in order to get ahead. That will be our final word. Well, should we use the expression health sovereignty? An ecosystem which encourages investments. 20% of world research is conducted at European level, but we have 60% in the US and 20% in Asia. And we were at 50% in Europe several decades ago. Now we are at 20%. We have got great hopes. We are undergoing a huge, major revolution thanks to AI, and I'm sure it will be much easier to take the patient on board in terms of treatment, follow-up, and support in the post-disease phase. And I've got great hopes thanks to AI and to the collaborative and collective work amongst all of us. Thanks very much.
Et nous allons poursuivre. Moi, je reste sur scène.
I'll remain on stage. Thank you to the four of you.